Okay, this video is called Why So Many Pictures for Presentations and for Books. I was reading this biography of Dr. Dennis Burkitt years ago, and one of the things that stayed with me was he traveled around the United States giving lectures about dietary fiber and his medical discoveries in Africa as a Christian missionary. He's an Irish doctor. And he noticed he would sometimes speak at the same place 10 years later, and people would walk up to him 10 years later and say, I still remember that drawing about the big stool and the small stool needing a big hospital, little hospital, and other drawings he had made. Better to put a fence at the top of the cliff than to clean up an ambulance at the bottom of it. And so he was startling the difference between how well people remembered the pictures compared to other parts of his talk. Okay. He figured out, of course, abdominal pressure syndrome. Now here's a lecture by Dr. McDougall, and he has some of the original drawings from Dennis Burkitt about, if you don't eat dietary fiber, you get constipated, you get little goat pellets. They don't stretch the rectum, so you have to strain at defecation. The Valsalva maneuver to tighten your abdominal muscles, and that straining at defecation produces back pressure, okay? And Burkitt had said, if you eat fiber, you'll have big stools and small hospitals. If you don't eat dietary fiber, you'll have small stools and you're going to need big hospitals. So this drawing is very memorable. There's a subtle addition, the sun is frowning here, the sun is smiling, okay? But the drawing's very helpful. And so, I learned from that. There wasn't any picture of abdominal pressure syndrome that I could find, so I simply made my own drawing. The back pressure causes outpouching of the sigmoid colon, producing diverticuli. They can pop, then you get diverticulitis. Itis means inflammation. The stool spills out onto the mesenteric fat. It can be very painful. It often needs to be surgically removed or abscess drained percutaneously with CT scan. Anyways, the back pressure goes into the veins, into the rectum, rectal hemorrhoids, into the scrotum, varicocele can cause infertility, into the leg, varicose veins. Okay, of course, varicose veins are also made worse by prolonged standing. They're also made worse in some other conditions, and they're part genetic. Okay, the dried out stool can form stool balls. In the appendix, for example, it's called an appendical lith. Lith means stone. It's also called a fecalith, a rock of stool that blocks the appendix. The mucus-secreting glands continue to secrete mucus. It gets distended and it'll pop. That's appendicitis. I've had to drain as many as 7 abscesses in one patient because of appendicitis. The back pressure pushes the stomach up into the chest. That's called a hiatal hernia. And then you get loosened lower esophageal sphincter, and you get gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD. That's super common. I see several hiatal hernias every day. So anyways, you also get more hernias, like inguinal hernias. You also get periumbilical hernias, but I couldn't draw that one into the picture. But what I'm trying to say is, this picture makes it so memorable. You're welcome to hit the print screen button. You can save the picture. Makes it so memorable. So pictures are very helpful. Now I got one more thing I got to show you about pictures. They're a very helpful part of a book or of a lecture. I think all teachers should strive to have pictures whenever it's appropriate for the topic. Now here's another study that I had read that had left a strong impression on me. The author's name is Lionel Standing, and it was learning 10,000 pictures. And what they found was people had extraordinary memory for pictures. Think about it. You could go watch a movie and then afterwards be able to talk about the movie and remember, most of it. So of course, it's more memorable when the movie is part of a story. We remember stories better, but still, every picture tells a story. Every picture is worth 1,000 words. There's truth in that. So the people had incredibly, logarithmically, exponentially better memory for pictures than for words. The only advantage of words is that if you really know the words, then they come faster than the picture does in terms of recall the picture, because there's more information in the picture. But the point is made. Pictures are tremendously beneficial for memory. Now, not every subject lends itself to pictures, but many of them do. And so whenever you have something where pictures would help, it's good to try to include them in your presentation or your book. So anyways, just making the point, there's a lot of strong evidence to support using pictures whenever possible, and even better, making the picture closely fit the subject and tell a story. Hope you found that helpful.